So welcome everybody today to the presentation on impact of COVID-19 on emotional health and self-care strategies. I'm Maribeth Leonard. I'm the CEO at LifeWays Community Mental Health. And I am joined by Denae Tracy, who is a licensed master social worker at LifeWays, and she is going to be doing a lot of the presentation today. But I'm going to get us started off. Next slide, Denae. So if you would throw into the chat any thoughts that you might have right now about, what word or phrase would you use to describe this past year? If you wouldn't mind throwing in a word or a thought about what what comes to mind. Stressful, absolutely. Isolate, that's a good one, isolating. Very good. So when we look at 2020, everything has changed in our lives. We had to change the way that we socialize, the way that we work, the way our kids got an education, the way we worship, even the way we even mourn the loss or even celebrate natural things that occur in our lives and with our families, whether that's marriage or birthdays. The way we went shopping had to change, the way that we access our community, or rather the way we didn't access our community, the way that we receive mental health care or physical health treatment. I can guarantee that all of us experienced some sort of loss, whether that loss was a job, loss of social isolation, loss of a loved one who might have contacted COVID, loss of our freedom, or maybe even loss of our health ourselves relative to because you got sick. And then we look at 2021. I don't know if many of you were like myself. When I looked at the new year getting ready to happen in December, I was looking at 2021 and hoping that, it would change. We'd be back to some type of normalcy. However, in 2021, we're seeing that there's still a lot of stress that continues. We entered with a lot of hopefulness about what 2021 would bring, but instead we've been faced with some new variants of COVID-19. There's lots of political unrest, a lot of protests. There's lots of people racing to get a vaccine and to get vaccinated. We still have a lot of continued virtual learning and virtual working. And then we've also been dealing with a lot of severe weather. So what do all those things lead to? So leads to stress. And now I'm going to pass this on to Denae to kind of talk about, is stress, is it a good thing or is it a bad thing?
Thank you. So actually stress is both good and bad. And not only is it good and bad, but it's actually necessary for survival. So this is the Yerkes-Dodson curve, which shows us that too much or too little stress can be a bad thing. So if we didn't experience stress when our children cry or when we smell smoke in the middle of the night, the human race probably wouldn't thrive. So stress can also be helpful in motivating us to act, to get things accomplished. So some stress, also known as eustress, according to this graph, can provide us with a burst of energy and heighten our awareness so that we can focus and we can problem solve. However, too much stress, or stress that exceeds a person's ability to cope, can lead to overstimulation and exhaustion. So we all have that threshold of what is considered too much. So that threshold is different for everybody, and it depends not only on what stress a person experiences, but also their level of resilience and their ability to cope. So prior to the unique challenges of 2020, people were experiencing stress. You might have been experiencing stress that comes with employment or parenting. You might have been experiencing stress related to finances or a strained relationship. So some of us were already very close to our threshold, where our stress became distress. So, and then 2020 happened. And all of those stressors that we just identified were added on top of what we were already experiencing. So for some of us, that pushed us over the edge immediately, pushed us over our threshold, because we were already so close to that threshold that it didn't take much to push us over the edge. Or maybe you weren't close to the threshold, but the stress that came with COVID was so great that it pushed you over. Maybe you or a loved one contracted COVID, or maybe you work in the healthcare field where daily you were exposed to the consequences of COVID. For others of us, maybe the changes that came with COVID energized us for a bit. We set up our new office space at home. We were rocking being the homeschool teacher. But then the pandemic continued and the stress continued. And most of us don't have the luxury of stepping away from our responsibilities, especially now. Our kids need help with online school. Our friend is distraught and needs some support. Our work calls. Our kids might be trying to manage their own stress, which is leading to behavior or emotional concerns. And the chronicity of the stress has led to exhaustion and burnout. So another element to add to the extensive list of stressors is the uncertainty that has accompanied COVID. Uncertainty if we're going to get sick, or keep our job, or have enough money to provide for our families. Our brains do not like uncertainty, and for good reason. If your brain doesn't know what's around the corner, it can't keep you out of harm's way. So studies actually show that you're calmer anticipating pain than anticipating uncertainty, because pain is certain and the body can prepare to react. So I have an 8-month-old daughter who is beginning to take steps holding onto a walker. So she's very wobbly and I am very nervous. So I'm always right behind her, holding out my arms to catch her if she falls. I'm on high alert, moving toys on the ground that could cause her to stumble, redirecting her if she's heading for an obstacle. I'm sure you can tell that she's my first. So this is what our brain does. It's constantly on the lookout, discerning what's safe and what isn't. And just like I get tired after working overtime trying to protect my unsteady daughter, our brain can cause us to become exhausted because it's constantly living in this amped up state of uncertainty. So where does all of this leave us? Emotionally exhausted. Emotional exhaustion occurs when we are at our capacity. We've hit that threshold of ours and we don't have any energy left to expend. All of our resources that we typically use to perform our daily tasks, our work, our caring for others and ourselves, all of those resources are depleted. So there are many different signs and symptoms of emotional exhaustion. People respond differently, and some may exhibit more of the emotional signs and symptoms. So some may notice they're taking on this negative self-image, or they're feeling ineffective or incompetent, or maybe they have a shift in mood and now they're more irritable, anxious, angry, or sad. They might have feelings of hopelessness or even thoughts of wanting to end their life and commit suicide. Or maybe they notice that they're having hypersensitivity or insensitivity to emotionally charged stimuli. So an example of this is viewing the news. So if you recall back when the pandemic began, all day and all night, we heard stories about COVID, about the death toll, about the poor working conditions of essential workers, people dying in isolation without the company or comfort of loved ones. And while the news is no longer inundated with COVID-related stories, they are still very much present. So recently we heard that there were over 500,000 deaths as a result of COVID. So a hypersensitive response would be someone experiencing a panic attack because of this news, or this news causing someone to enter a depressive episode. But on the opposite end of the spectrum, an insensitive response would be someone who says, meh, who cares? 500,000. We knew this day would come. Whatever. So if you find that you're having either of these responses, that's probably a good indicator that you might be emotionally exhausted. So others may experience more behavioral symptoms of emotional exhaustion, which can include using alcohol or drugs, spending excessive amounts of time watching TV or scrolling social media, trying to numb your feelings, avoiding social interaction, lacking motivation and focus, which might cause more mistakes at work than usual, or you might be arguing with others more often. So lastly, some people might notice physical symptoms of emotional exhaustion, which can include muscle fatigue and tension, insomnia, headaches, increased susceptibility to illness, sore back and neck, irritable bowel or GI distress. You can even have skin reactions, rashes, breakouts, or you might be grinding your teeth at night. So how do we usually cope with stress? We get together with friends and family, we go out to eat, we go to the movies, we get coffee with a friend, we might go on vacation or go work out at the gym. The problem is that we have all of this added stress, but our ways of coping have been limited. So how do we cope now? We withdraw, we numb, we eat, we don't eat, we get depressed, we use alcohol, we avoid strong emotions, we get angry or sarcastic, or we stop caring about others. So to avoid this or to get out of this cycle that we might already be in, we need to take care of ourselves. So if you've flown before, I'm sure you've heard the familiar spiel that the attendants give before the planes take off, right? They inform everyone that in the event of an emergency and oxygen masks are deployed, you're to put on your own mask before helping others. And this makes sense, right? You can't help others if you can't breathe yourself. Life is the same way. You're not going to be effective in your roles, whether that's at work, in the community, with family or friends, if you're so overwhelmed that you can't concentrate and you're forgetting things and you're faking being interested in listening to other people because you're just burnt out, you're emotionally exhausted. You're not being selfish by saying no. And there are times, and I would argue that we are in one of those times, that we need to pull back and we need to focus on ourselves. So Katie Reed, who's a writer, a speaker, and mental health advocate, said, self-care is giving the world the best of you instead of what's left of you. So self-care, if you're not familiar with the term, is anything you do to take care of yourself to stay well. Wellness is a little more complex than you might think, though. There are 8 dimensions of wellness, or it's also known as the wellness wheel. And all 8 dimensions of the wheel are necessary to have a balanced and happy life. Sometimes people think that mental health is treated from the neck up. However, mental health impacts and is impacted by every facet of a person's life. So our self-care strategies and how we take care of ourselves should target all 8 dimensions of wellness if we truly want to achieve that balanced life. So in the next part of the presentation, we're going to look at each of these 8 dimensions, and I'm going to offer you some strategies you can use to incorporate in your daily life to improve your wellness in each area. So starting with social, humans are hardwired for social connection. Not only does isolation and loneliness feed anxiety and other behavioral health problems, it also impacts your physical health in a major way. So researchers have recently said that loneliness is just as bad for your health as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. So this pandemic has been especially difficult because we've been recommended and even mandated to isolate from others at times. However, in order to nourish that social part of our being, we need to make connections with other people, especially in a time when social connection has been lacking. We need to prioritize our relationships with others. Until it's safe or until you feel comfortable meeting face-to-face with others, you can schedule a weekly call with family, host a virtual game night, or send cards to others. You could also schedule a regular date night with your spouse or partner and regular activities with your children. If you like to bake, I'm sure your neighbors would love being taste testers, at least mine do. Finally, it's really important that you ask for and you accept help from others. We do not have to weather life alone, and we should not. Leaning on others will actually strengthen our relationships, and it can build trust. We also need to physically care for ourselves by living a healthy and balanced life. This includes eating nutritious food, drinking water, and exercising. I'm sure many of us are looking for an excuse to go to bed early or take a nap, and healthy sleep patterns are vital for our health. In this past year, you may have had a doctor appointment or two get canceled. If you haven't rescheduled those, now is a good time to do so. There are also health benefits to deep breathing. Deep breathing helps you control your nervous system, which lessens your stress response. Deep breathing increases the amount of oxygen that's going to the brain, and it can stimulate that part of your nervous system that promotes a state of calmness. So intellectual self-care involves how you think and what makes you develop intellectually. So it involves the pursuit of learning and engaging in new things. So some examples of intellectual self-care activities include reading a book, listening to a podcast, learning a new language, doing a puzzle, learning a new skill, playing a board game, or visiting a museum. There are several museums offering virtual tours, including the Art Institute of Chicago, the Detroit Institute of Art, just to name a couple. Practicing mindfulness can also improve our focus and our ability to retain information. Mindfulness is simply being aware of what you are sensing and feeling in the moment. There are several apps that you can download to help you practice mindfulness. Headspace is one of them. Headspace is one word, and the mindfulness app. Mindfulness is also really helpful for our emotional well-being. So to nurture our emotional well-being, we need to allow ourselves to experience what we feel. So often we try to push down and suppress our emotions because we think that's what we need to do in order to continue functioning. However, this can have the opposite effect over time. Without allowing ourselves to feel our emotions, it can cause our mental health and productivity to decline. So cry if you need to. Scream if you need to. This pandemic and everything that's come along with it has been hard, and we don't have to pretend that everything is okay. There's a lot of research that shows that our thoughts are connected to the way we feel and the way we behave. If we are constantly thinking negative thoughts, we're likely to feel and act overwhelmed and hopeless. So some good practices you can incorporate into your day are giving yourself affirmations and writing down 3 positive things that happened. This will focus your mind on positive aspects and of ourselves and our day rather than the negative. We can also have a conversation about positive things rather than focusing on the negative. So rather than asking how someone's day was, reframe that question to ask what good or exciting things happened today. Beginning your time off with positive conversation can help you recharge. It's not like we have to completely neglect the stressful things that happen and not process the challenging things that happen throughout our day, but starting off the conversation on a positive note can be really helpful for our emotional well-being. Lastly, watch what you watch. The news and social media have been full of negative and fearful messages. And again, if we constantly fill our mind with these messages, it's likely to be reflected in the way we behave, in the way we feel. Another aspect of wellness is caring for our spiritual needs. So while physical self-care is directed at taking care of the body, mental self-care is directed at taking care of our mind, spiritual self-care is focused on taking care of the soul. So if you practice a particular religion, this might mean taking time out of your day to pray, do devotions, or attend a religious service. However, spiritual self-care can also entail meditating, singing, exploring nature, making time for reflection, and finding experiences that are awe-inspiring, those experiences that make us feel small, but in a good way. Another way to connect is to read inspirational literature or listen to inspirational talks or music. Some environmental self-care tasks include going on a hike or recycling, planting a tree, starting a garden. But environmental self-care is not just about taking care of the environment and nature, but it's also about our own personal spaces. So decluttering your home, making your bed, organizing your workspace can all cultivate relaxation. Stress related to finances can affect us emotionally, causing anxiety, maybe even depression. When we experience financial struggles, we tend to ruminate and create more negative thoughts. So it's important to take steps toward decreasing our financial stress. A good first step is to track your income and expenses. Find out what your spending weaknesses are so you can set boundaries for yourself. If you have debt, prioritize those payments. Also, create a family budget and set a goal for your future spending habits so you can have some margin in your budget and afford things that are meaningful to you. Finally, invest in your future. Much of the stress we feel today may be coming from worrying about tomorrow. So for this reason, it might be helpful to start contributing to a retirement account. Financial self-care, just like other forms of self-care, look different for everybody. So if you're laid off or if you have lots of debt, you can and still should still practice financial self-care. Our last type of self-care is occupational self-care. So our goal here is to use our gifts and strengths to live out our purpose, but also have clear professional boundaries. Especially if you've had to work from home during this pandemic, you might have noticed the line that's between work and life has become pretty convoluted. So therefore, it's really important now more than ever to separate work from home. Without this boundary, you can become overwhelmed, over-involved, and just emotionally drained. So one way you can help separate work from home is to create a habit or a ritual to close your workday. So choose an action to take consistently at the end of your workday to signal that transition from work to home. It can even be as simple as tidying up your workspace before leaving. But repeating this action at the end of the day, every workday, will help your brain shift out of work mode. If you're working from home, try to set aside a place in your home that's designated specifically for work. Our brains love to make associations and patterns, so our brains will associate work and whatever level of stress that might entail with particular locations in our house. We want to make sure that we're able to leave that stress in a certain location rather than have it spill out to the general areas of our home. During your workday, be sure to take your full lunch break and not at your desk. Now that the weather's getting warmer, you might take a walk or eat your lunch outside so you can get some fresh air. Also, don't let your vacation days go unused or pile up. Lastly, it might be helpful to make a list of your tasks and figure out which things you can delegate if you're in a position to do so. If not, figure out which things you can ask for help with. Don't feel like you have to be a martyr for your job. Your job will never be more important than your well-being. So now we want to ask the question, how are you? It's very important to become aware of what areas in our life we're thriving in and what areas need some extra attention. Therefore, we've created a self-assessment to examine each of the 8 dimensions of wellness as they apply in your life. And then after that assessment, there are some worksheets to help you review your results and create some self-care goals. And then the final page of the packet is a list of the self-care strategies that we have reviewed today. So I'm going to drop the self-assessment in the chat. I believe it was dropped earlier, so if you want to scroll up there, you might be able to find it. But give me just a second. Okay, you should be able to access it in the chat now. So I want to take, let's take about 10 minutes to do this self-care assessment. Just focus on the first part, which is the assessment, and then we'll talk about the goals later on. First, I want to make sure everybody has it though. Okay, perfect. So I'm going to mute myself and we're going to come back together in 10 minutes to review our results. Was anyone surprised by their results?
I was.
I was too, to be honest.
I thought it was going to be a different area relative to strength and, weakness areas. So I was a little shocked.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Anybody else have any thoughts? Was it helpful?
Kind of reinforces some positives, identifies opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
Personally, I scored a little bit higher in the environmental one than I thought, so that was good. And some of the ones I was reaffirmed that okay, seems all right.
Mm-hmm. Good. Good. Okay, well, hopefully that was insightful for everyone. I want to share that document and just talk through the next portion of it. So we're not going to take time to do this today. Sorry for my scrolling. So we just wrapped up. Hopefully you were able to score your assessment results and identified what dimensions you could improve on and what dimensions you're having success in. So the next part is to just write down all of the areas that you'd like to make changes. So as you were going through that assessment, what areas struck you that you thought, I need to spend more time here? So I just want you to make a list of those changes, and then I want you to prioritize them. Because if you're like me, sometimes I get too ahead of myself, right? I just want to do everything all at once. So I want you to prioritize them, however many you have listed. And then the final thing I want you to do is set 3 specific self-care goals. I just want you to limit it to 3. Even if you feel like just limiting it to 1 or 2, whatever you feel comfortable with, but I don't want you to start with more than 3. So go ahead and list 3 specific goals, and I want them to be specific, or I want to encourage you to make them specific. So instead of just saying, I want to walk more, time out how long you're going to walk, how often you're going to walk. So 15-minute walk, 3 days per week. So now we have a specific goal that you can, you'll know when you've achieved it or not. And then this worksheet also has you identify any resources to identify if you're actually able to meet your goal or where the gaps are, if you need additional resources. And then I want you to identify a support person. And don't just write a person's name down. I want you to actually share this with that person. Share your goals with this person so that they can actually support you in a specific way. And then are there any barriers? And then how are we going to strategize to overcome those barriers, whatever those barriers are? Maybe that's getting the support person involved in that way, or reaching out to community resources, whatever relates to your goals. So it's just a one-pager to cement this a little bit more. Take it the next step. We hear presentations about taking care of ourselves. We think, yeah, I should probably do that. And that's where it stops for a lot of us. So I really want you to take the time to do this, whether that's later on today or after work tonight, to spend some time creating some goals for yourself. Okay, so although incorporating some self-care tasks into your daily routine is important, it's also important to know when to seek professional help. If you ever experience thoughts to harm yourself or others, reach out for help immediately. Also, if you find that your symptoms are impacting your roles and your relationships, or your quality of life is decreasing, or your symptoms are worsening despite using some self-care strategies, it might be time to seek out a professional. So if you'd like to seek out professional help and don't know where to start, LifeWays offers free mental health screenings. You can call or walk into our Jackson or Hillsdale office and meet with an access clinician who will complete a brief screen, which is free of charge, to better understand your symptoms. The brief screen typically lasts 15 to 30 minutes. The access clinician will then help connect you with the most appropriate level of treatment. And LifeWays itself offers a variety of mental health services and treatment that is individualized to your unique needs. So we also have crisis services available 24/7. So if you or someone you know is experiencing a mental health crisis, please call our 24/7 crisis line to speak with a master's level clinician. We also have mobile teams that can come to you. Teams are available for both adults and children that can meet with you in your home or anywhere else in the community that you feel comfortable to provide support and to assist you in managing the crisis. I want to thank everyone for your time this morning. And are there any questions?
I'm looking at the chat box, I'm not seeing any.
Okay, well, I hope this was helpful and insightful for everybody. And please, I want to encourage you to take your self-care assessment and create those goals and objectives for yourself. So some good self-care podcasts or books. That's a good question. I'm going to open that up to the group. Does anyone have any suggestions, any podcasts or books that you listen to? I guess, oh, go ahead.
I'm not seeing anybody list any self-care podcasts.
Okay. I guess it depends on what type of self-care you are looking for. So speaking of the 8 dimensions, so just in my own personal life, I'm trying to stimulate that intellectual side. So the podcasts that I'm currently listening to right now are all about learning new skills and tasks, things I don't know. And PR is one that I'm currently into. So I guess it just depends on what area of self-care you're looking to expand. In general, though, I'd be happy to take a look at that and get some recommendations for you. I don't know if, Tim, you might be able to post that somewhere, if I can get a list of resources together.
Yes, I can.
Perfect. Okay. Are there any other questions or any other resources that you guys would like that I might be able to help out with?
I think if we can post those 2 apps that you spoke of relative to the Headspace and the mindfulness app, it's also additional resources for people.
Yeah, absolutely. Tim, are you able to answer that? Where will they be posted?
It'll be posted on the Jackson Women's Week website, and that's jacksonwomensweek.com.
Thank you. All right, everyone. Well, thank you for joining. If you have any questions about anything that was presented or any questions about LifeWays, please feel free to reach out to myself or Maribeth.
Denae and Maribeth, thank you very much. Appreciate your time and information today. Great part of Women's Week. And remember that these will be available, the entire videos will be available at that website.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, ladies.